Hey everyone, welcome to a brief advanced sports analytics live stream. Coming to you live from a rooftop. So I have a crowded apartment right now. So trying to keep background noise down. Going to go over tonight's champion mode contests on SuperDraft for tonight's MLB slate. They have featured cash game and GPP contests for tonight. Cubs. Uh, Screen share settings, making sure hold on, running into some technical difficulties here. Okay, have a shared screen now. So I want to go over to our MLB projection and optimization tool and talk about some and how we can program those into an optimizer to create lineups at scale that we want, that have properties I think that are desirable for single game contests. Contests should give you projections for specifically that game under their champion mode format. The construction of champion mode, and here we can just do a quick optimal run real quick. There's 5 slots for Superflex in which players are given these multipliers that they are assigned to by the SuperDraft pricing team. And then there is 1 champion slot in which players receive a multiplier boost of 50%. So that isn't AJ Pollock jumping from 1.2 to 1.7 or plus 0.5. It's AJ Pollock 1.2 times 1.5. So 50% of his 1.2 multiplier is 0.6. So the champion AJ Pollock has a 1.8 multiplier. So that's worth noting. Yeah, and one I think component, we do have some of these 0.65 or 0.05 multipliers. So Javi Baez 1.65x, times 1.5 gives us a number with 0.475 trailing at the end, being them when they have this ending multiplier ending in 0.5, 0.05, they do get a slight plus 0.025 boost in their champion mode. Doesn't always isn't always significant in a big way, but it is kind of a slight boost that some of these guys have. When we run just an optimal, I think this is a fine approach for cash games. Just press optimize, press generate lineups. Going with our top projected lineup is how I usually play these. Just optimizing towards fantasy points for cash game purposes, whatever. Correlation here between these Los Angeles Dodgers hitters and the Chicago pitcher Alzolay. I think we should be totally fine with that. We really are just trying to get the most points, not trying to chase a huge line to a significant floor performance. Multiple players have noticed so far as SuperDraft game mode specializing to have an on you the sheer volume that hitters can. However, hitter production can be quite sparse. It's very feasible for some of these top tier hitters to go 0 for. As we're pitchers, obviously they can have negative production, but for the most more stability purposes, going with pitchers I think makes a ton of sense, and focusing on for a lot of our cash game builds. And to be honest, I think the value has been so high on running into production or the so high for pitchers that in tournaments there have the most recent kind of big showdown slate or champ slate, the SuperDraft we had, Philadelphia, the Mets, like Eflin and David Peterson. Even though they didn't have spectacular games, the multiplier value was just so high on these guys that they both I think were part of their main tournament winning lineup. So when pricing is tighter, might be a little bit concerned about taking on too much negative correlation. When you roster both pitchers, you're naturally rostering at least in our optimal run. There it goes. Even though we're taking Buehler and Alzolay, we naturally have to fill out with 3 others. Our projections are very high on the Dodgers hitters, so we're still getting this negative correlation between Alzolay and the hitters for Muncy, Seager, Betts to have a production. There are paths to everyone struggling and just being a pitcher's duel, in which case I think higher priority. In general, I'm trying to avoid negative, but I will say, given the value that has been available to pitchers single game from so far, I do think going with both pitchers and taking on some of that negative is fine. In game, intriguing, a pitcher that projects so favorably like Buehler, maybe trying to be more specific and avoiding negative correlation, might be something we strive for. So we're going to walk through steps, kind of how to do how to program rules in so that we do or avoid negative correlation using using the tools that we have. Just made some updates today actually to our app that allow you to create single game specific rules. Talk through some of the rules available, making specific locks or to captain, champion mode, or making locks or fades to players that are, so like, for example, the optimizers are going to tend to give pitchers general one to take our shots, at least one guy that gets run. We take our hitters and see if we can get a champion on the hitter who has a big 3-run home or something like that. We could fade Buehler and Alzolay, allow them in our super flex slots, but make builds that prevent them from appearing in the champion slot. And as you can see, we get kind of a mix of Dodger hitters in the champion slot with plenty of Buehler and Alzolay in Superflex because of their favorable projection. We talked about, I think, earlier this week, utilizing bounce to promote diversity within lineups, as is the case with traditional kind of multiplier. Employ bounce on hitters or on players of all positions to promote diversity. As you can see with these builds, we just get like a ton of Buehler, and he's just in all the champion slots. If we wanted to push on Buehler, but maybe not have him take up so much of our champion positioning, we could impose some bounce on champions, so that will bounce a player, bounce their projection. In lineup 1, we take Buehler champion. He's balanced to a projection that is 70% of his original. He is, appears in the super flex, so he regenerates quickly. And, essentially, when checking our exposures, we can see, we have Buehler in all lineups, but he's not fully in the champion slot, the super flex some bounce for players in the super flex, such that we will project so strong that he's kind of when he's getting bounced out of the champion slot, he is appearing in the flex and he's a champion, kind of vice versa. But some of these other guys, like I don't know, some of these hitters, it is one way to promote kind of more diversity. As you can see, the number of players that we select is a little longer. The exposures tend to be a little smoother. So one good way to promote diversity using bounce. Across a single game as well as full slate, multi-game slates. As far as managing correlation and trying to prevent combinations of players that are anti-correlate, puts here that control how rosters get filled out. For example, if we are rostering, want to limit the number of batters that appear within the lineup when Buehler is champion. That's kind of naturally how these lineups are playing under hitters. However, if we let's say we wanted to lock in Alzolay as our champion and rerun, you're seeing we're still getting like a ton of Dodger hitters that we might want to, have less Dodger hitter exposure when Alzolay is championed. So we could put in a rule that caps the number of hitters that can appear versus a pitcher who is in the champion slots. If we can't cap it at 1, when we do roster Alzolay in the champion slot, we're never getting Dodger heavy lineups. We can have exposure to Buehler, but we're limiting it to only one a Dodger hitter. So Betts is kind of stacking hitters being out. There's just kind of negative to how the lineup could get to the top of a large medium field tournament. There's any kind of set fast what that max number looks like. But max amount of hitters that we are taking on across from a champion pitcher. So that's kind of one way to think about that. If we set it, we'll maybe go 2, and then we'll kind of bounce our pitchers so that we are getting a mix of Buehler and Alzolay lineups in the champion. Buehler's getting bounced, and you can see how that plays out. So it's looking like actually, when we don't have any sort of opposing pitcher limits, we do get a lot of Buehler. Well, yeah. Oh, sorry. If we put this up to 5, we do get a decent bit of Alzolay champion. But when we cap the number of hitters that Alzolay can go up against in the champion slot, we just don't get any Alzolay because inherent projections, it's always useful to kind of go back and forth between your rules, try to understand what exposures are being kicked out from certain builds, and kind of make sure that the exposures that we're getting align with how we're thinking about how we want to put rosters together. Apply the same rule for any pitcher. I think there's less need to be restrictive on, by rostering a pitcher in the super flex, we, think that a pitcher will do well, but we have routes to winning tournaments if that pitcher does good but not great, and there are paths to hitters opposing that pitcher having great games, even if the opposing pitcher has a good but not great game. But if we wanted to, cap like the number of hitters that appear, so anytime we roster Buehler, whether it's champion or super flex, we never want to have more than 3 Dodger hitters. Another component is, how do we want to manage hitters that we are have the champion slot filled with? Let's just say, for example, we want to, lock in Rizzo. I'm not sure why we're not able to find Rizzo. All right, well, let's say maybe he has some champion, Chris Bryant, and we give it our runs, and just looking at like these first couple lineups, we can see we have Chris Bryant, Cubs hitter, and then no other Cubs within that lineup. So for Bryant to have an exceptional game and this kind of these type of lineups as a whole to work, it really, and beat out other lineups that maybe have Bryant as a champion and Cubs hitters, we just need Bryant to hit like solo home runs, steal bases, do things that are independent and kind of individual stats. So naturally, when we do have a hitter in the champion slot, I do think we want at least one, ideally a couple hitters from that same lineup, from that same team in our lineups. So we can do that with this min in hitters with captain MVP champion batter. If we set this to 2, when we do our runs, now we will see all lineups that have a hitter in the champion slot require at least 2 hitters from their lineup. So now we can see we have Hayward and Duffy in in our lineups with Champion Bryant, such that there are ways to there are paths to Chicago offense being productive kind of as a unit and relying on more than just individual like solo home runs and stuff for Bryant, where maybe he can drive in Hayward or Duffy or vice versa. We kind of take on more positive correlation with these type of rules. And then lastly, avoiding negative correlation. If Bryant is going to have a big game, hit like a multi-run homer, or get multiple hits, multiple RBIs, stuff like that, that is going to come likely at the detriment of Buehler. Obviously, it can come at the detriment of the Dodgers bullpen. But I think if we're championing a hitter, we might want to make rules that avoid rostering the opposing to allow champion batters to go up against opposing pitchers. For tournament purposes, though, we might want to uncheck this and do our run when we do have champion Chris Bryant, and do like I don't know, like a Alzolay, or I don't know. We won't do any sort of fading on any of the pitchers. We'll just turn our bounce up so that we're getting kind of a mix of guys. In these instances where we do have hitters as our champion, we just want to make sure that Alzolay isn't in those lineups. And we also want to make sure that those lineups have at least 3 Dodgers in them. So anyways, hope this gives you a sense kind of how you can Sorry, cut out there. Anyway, hope this sort of gives you an idea of how optimizers can be used with sports like NBA of correlation at play. I think sometimes it can be valuable, or it can be productive to just throw your projections into an optimizer, spit out 50 or 150 lineups and then submit, maybe some minor kind of bounce or group control. But for MLB, where there is kind of large correlative relationships that are at play, we do want to make sure that our lineups are not too negatively correlated, and that we are taking on good positive correlation rules. Hope that tutorial does give you a sense maybe of how you can leverage an optimizer with rules, with diversity kind of inputs, to create lineups that are have good correlation properties, are mixed and varied enough such that you're not overly dependent on any 1 or 2 players, having a big game in order to achieve positive ROI. And encourage you guys to check out the SuperDraft champion mode contest tonight for LA and Chicago. Should be a fun matchup. I think they have cash games and GPPs. Encourage you guys to check that out. Be back later this week to go over some more MLB, maybe some NBA. So we will see you guys likely Friday.